You familiar with Clive Lewis?
Nope.
Very sensible chap. Labour MP for Norwich South and Gaza. That was what Labour MPs are.
Isn't half their party a member for
Yeah.
honorary member for Gaza?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and have been for quite some time. And
Why isn't that real? Just for a minute, sincerely, why do they not just name them all honorary members of Parliament for Gaza?
Well, I mean,
they won't refuse it.
They're literally honorary members of everything that's not British, to be honest. Because, I mean, like, Clive Lewis has got some bangers in his past. This is one of my favorite from Guido Fawkes, when they're like, oh, we're going to have to do something with these illegal immigrants. Let's put them in holiday camps. And Clive Lewis hears the word camp, and it's like, oh, just like the Boer War. It's like, nope, not quite. You know, these holiday camps have water slides and roofs.
And look like Butlins.
Because they will be Butlins.
Because they probably are Butlins.
Yeah, I have to pay to go to a holiday camp.
Sorry for the interruption. I'm Father Calvin Robinson, and you can watch my Common Sense Crusade at 3 p.m. on Thursdays only on lotuseaters.com, where you can sign up for as little as £5 per month. Deus Vult.
Cross the channel, and you get put in them for free. And Clive Lewis is like, how dare you? That's basically like World War II. And of course, another absolute banger position for Clive, if I can get this working, is when the government's like, hey, you know all these rapists, murderers, and pedophiles who have done their time and should be sent back to the country that they came from? Clive Lewis was like, no, and decided to jump in the way of that by writing a letter that was signed by 70 Labour MPs to say, no, it's a tragedy to send these rapists, murderers, and pedophiles back to Jamaica.
What, do they class them as like skilled migrants or something? They actually even have an argument for this other than just we like crime?
Deportation?
No, I can tell you what their argument is, and it will seem completely mad.
That's because it is, yeah.
Because it is completely mad. These are people who think they have taken the economic way of thinking, which can often be very clarifying and useful to people. EWOT, you'll sometimes see it written on Twitter by economists. And this type of thinking, which in other circumstances is very, very clarifying with goods and sometimes services, is just not with people. And the thing is, they pretend people are widgets.
That is true.
Anyone who has done an economics A-level will be familiar with the widget story and the use of widgets. Widgets are actually the thing that you get in cans of Guinness to try and put the head on it. That, by the way, is what a widget actually is. Yeah. But that's what they think.
In this case, it's liberal human rights laws and agendas. They say, quote, deportations epitomize the government's continued hostile environment agenda. Not only is the agenda unjust, but also the Equality and Human Rights Commission has now found the Home Office broke the law with its series of hostile environment policies and inhumane treatment of the Windrush generation. And therefore, these 50 Jamaican murderers, rapists, and pedophiles are going to stay in the UK.
But do you see the widget thinking, though?
Oh,
These people are the same as the Windrush generation.
Yeah.
Purely based on skin colour and country of origin in this case. Yep. And this is a complete collapsing of two groups of people who are completely different in every way.
I completely agree. I would not say the average person who from the Windrush generation is actually a present threat to young ladies walking the streets. However, the convicted rapists, I think you can classify in that way. But anyway, so he went to some conference in Germany. He was like, you know what?
Like all good left wingers.
Yeah, like all good leftists. I've just been to a conference in Germany. And you know what the real problem is? The far right. Now, he's basically a communist. And so this is rote leftist nonsense. But I just love the way that, I mean, you can see the text here. In fact, we'll watch a bit of it. It's 2 minutes long, but we'll watch a bit of it because he's just panicking because the far right is everywhere.
For defeating the far right in politics. Now, as you're probably aware, across the world, across Europe, in the United States, the far right are on the rise.
Not in Britain, though. We must defeat the far right. They're on the rise. Where? In Europe and in America? Okay, but what about the impending Labour government we're about to get?
Part of the issue for a lot of these very pro-European Remain supporting MPs, and this may become an issue in 5 years' time for Leave supporting MPs, but in the opposite direction, is that the European Union's in the process of tacking right. And it's tacking right among the national governments. And as we know from the way elections to the European Parliament work, within a few years, the Parliament follows the national governments because they tend to hold those European Parliament elections at the same time as national elections. And Europeans are not well trained in the Australian and American style insurance policy of voting for different political parties in the House and the Senate. That's something that both Australians, particularly, but Americans too, are now learning and are very good at. Europeans haven't quite cottoned onto that.
Yeah.
So Steve Davies has made the point that he says in 5 years' time, if this keeps up over the immigration issue, you're going to finish up with a really, really quite right-wing EU and lots.
Suddenly,
and lots,
I want to rejoin.
and lots, and yet he's made that joke. He said, and you're going to get right-wing people saying, "Oh shit, the EU's good now," and then you're going to get lefty Remainers going, "Oh shit, the EU's bad now."
Yeah, Jeremy Corbyn can finally come out of his shell. He thinks it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, look, I love his expression. I mean, this looks like a man who is taking things very seriously. Let's watch a bit more.
In Hungary, in Sweden, we have far-right governments now.
Just to be clear, the government in Sweden is not far right. This is going to shock you, but the government in Sweden is very moderate centre-right anyway.
In place who are doing all they can to undermine democracy and make life as hard as possible for centre-left and left parties.
Can we get some of those? How do we get those? They sound brilliant. And they sound amazing. How do we get what Sweden has? Which is not something I thought I'd ever say. I'm not even joking.
Well, the only proper right government now in the EU, if you want to use the conventional political science definitions, is actually in Hungary.
Yeah.
The others are not. The others are centre-right.
Yeah.
And you've just got this. The number of times I've had to explain to people that the immigration policy that all these different countries want to copy off of Australia, in its original form, it was introduced by a Labor government, and the modifications that were done subsequently by a mixture of both Labor and coalition governments, they're bipartisan.
Yep.
Because as soon as you pay attention to the median voter, then you have to control the borders, and it is the only way to make any other form of immigration acceptable.
One of the problems I have with the impending Labour disaster that we're going to have is that they are going to reduce immigration. Because they're not going to have it as... No, they are. They are actually... I swear to God, quote me on this in a year's time.
I
right?
will.
No. Immigration will go from 1.4 million to 800,000. Right? So it will still be a net of like 300,000. It'll be back to Tony Blair levels, because Tony Blair will be behind Keir Starmer going, what are you doing? Sort that out. Because everyone's going mad to the right because they're sick of seeing immigrants everywhere. Sort it out. And they will. And they'll make it tolerable, but the process will continue.
The other thing, too, is that there are certain coalitional and transactional elements in British politics that make it very difficult for a political party to do things. It's very hard for the Tories to build houses because so many NIMBYs are Tories in blue seats. That's a classic example. You need somebody... None of those people are going to vote Labor. You're going to need a Labor government to do this. Likewise, the Tories, this is a classic missed opportunity, are free to squish immigration because all the people who are pro-open borders are never going to vote Conservative.
Really,
it's
the
the same
Tories
thing.
missed an opportunity.
So they missed an opportunity.
Who could imagine that?
But you find this in a number of areas with the NHS. Like Labor, for example, could quite dramatically, and did historically with Blair, make major changes to the NHS because it's seen as a captive Labor issue. Where are the people who love the NHS and think it's a member of the sainted multitude? Where are they going to go? They
Lib
can't
Dems,
really
maybe.
vote for the Lib Dems, who are more market-oriented, more Tory with their economic policies. So they finish up they're stuck. And huge amounts of change in politics are dependent on things like that a big block of voters have nowhere to go.
Anyway, let's carry on and just see the full scope of the madness.
But there have been some notable successes. Poland and in Spain, where left-wing parties have been able to stop and defeat the rise of the far right. But that could be temporary. Here in the UK, we have a far-right government that openly uses racism and Islamophobia to divide communities.
How far right would you call the Tories, Callum?
Well, I mean, there was the speech from Rishi Sunak last night where he just came out and said, I hate all the... No, he didn't. He didn't do that. It just didn't happen. What is he talking about, man?
The Conservatives are further to the left than Tony Blair.
It's just bollocks. I mean, I sort of don't know what to do with these people because, I mean, they
Has
must know
anyone
they're
gone
lying.
through and just got an archive of Jack Straw's comments
Oh my
on
God.
uncontrolled immigration back in the day?
Yeah.
I mean, he was helped by the fact that he was blind and had a guide dog. And it's very, very difficult to criticize someone who's obviously physically disabled like that. That probably did help him. But even so, he was completely upfront about this issue.
Tony Blair's comments on black crime are very far right in
Yeah.
2008, where he was just like, no, it's just the black kids in the communities stabbing each other. It's like, bloody hell, Tony, you Nazi.
And
Like,
that's
you
Rishi
can't say that.
Sunak saying that.
Yeah,
It's
imagine
just like,
Rishi
ooh.
Sunak saying that. The Conservatives would never say anything like that.
No.
But,
And or if they did, like that donor, they would be accused of being racist.
yeah,
yeah.
so I just watched this and I was in awe of how detached from reality Clive Lewis is. He's like, look, far right rising everywhere, except in this country where, I'm the MP.
The Klan are already in power.
Yeah,
It's terrible. Anyway, I'm a black MP.
Yes, we're the most diverse political party in British history. We're in charge and implementing a program of mass migration. And so we really have to be worried about the rise of the far right, especially as we're about to get a massive stonking Labour majority. So it's like, right, okay, what are you even talking about? And this kind of dovetails together with a chap called Ben Bradley. Now, I actually quite like Ben Bradley because he's one of those sort of normal MPs who's just like, oh, I walk around my constituency and I help people out. And you can see he's actually got like young people out helping him and stuff like this. Is not an unusual post. So he does a lot of local campaigning, local issues. He's a councillor and
An MP, yes.
for Nottingham. And so he's a good chap, seems to be doing the right thing. And he put out this video. And this video drove them all. I mean, you can see by the Prol star here retweeting, but like, oh my God, look at this BNP. Listen to this madness.
Labour councils failing local residents. If you live in a Labour council area, you pay more council tax. You're more likely to be a victim of crime. You're more likely to experience fly tipping. You're more likely to have to wait behind non-British nationals for social housing. Their record is terrible.
Well, that's true.
That's actually true.
It's totally true.
Because what happened, and this is history that goes back a long, long time.
Come a bit
back
closer to the mic. Sorry.
That probably goes back to the 1960s. Social housing used to be allocated based on a queuing system.
Mhm.
And what happened was a change, and I think it was probably local authority by local authority. I don't think it was national. I'll stand corrected on that, though, if it was, is to shift towards need. And the need shift was designed initially, we need to get the homeless people off the streets and that kind of thing. But it turns out that it actually doesn't work. And this is sort of one of these very morally complex areas where there are different ways of solving what's known as a coordination problem, and not all of them work. Most of the time, markets solve your coordination problems and they're fine. But there are times, and there's actually a chap, I think he's Canadian, a chap called Michael Sandel, who's written a whole book about this. But his argument is that there are times when queuing is better than markets. And a lot of British people will just knowingly nod at this because we are the nation of queuers.
Yeah.
But it turns out that forcing people to not claim some sort of priority based on an inherited characteristic or an inherent characteristic is actually morally good for them. They learn that they can't just push in front of others, that they have to wait their turn. There is a good reason for this British tradition.
I just want to say, this all is very obvious to us, preaching to the choir here. But it is something interesting that all of the left-wingers are like, well, I mean, like, no, how could you say you're more likely to wait behind non-British nationals for social housing? So hang on a second. When do we have the conversation that non-British nationals should be entitled to social housing? When did that conversation
Why are you even in the queue?
Yeah, exactly. Why are you in the queue? Why are you here, in fact? Are you contributing to the economy if you can't afford your own house to rent somewhere? Why? But no, this is all totally presumed because, of course,
The international homeless will rise up and...
Racist Ben Bradley is otherwise channeling the National Front. It's like, what are you talking about? It is nonsensical to suggest that people who come from abroad are entitled to a house in Britain paid for by the taxpayer.
Just as a side note, you do notice that they completely gave up on all the other points.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, it will be filthier and you'll pay more in tax and blah, 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 blah.
But you are a racist. Okay, fine. And so Ben had a response to this. This is a Labour councillor, who just a quick thing. Wow, Conservative Party political broadcast just now gone. And what I love about these is it's like Boris with the burkas and the bum boys. It's like, look, you can say that it's a bad thing, but a bunch of people are like, oh, really? Okay, I'm in for that. Ben Bradley says that in Labour-run councils, you're more likely to have to wait behind non-British national social housing. Yeah, keep amplifying the message, Alex. I want everyone to hear it. I want everyone in the country.
Quite a
Yeah,
but
of course.
quite a lot of these people have no sense of
Yep.
of how they present on social media.
Yep.
And not Ben Bradley, he's quite good at using
Yeah,
it,
he is.
but quite a lot of them,
Yeah.
but on all sides of politics, they don't. It's the Stoic line. Have you ever stopped to consider how you look?
Mm.
You can't control the way other people
Yeah.
look at view you, but you can stop behaving like a complete bellend in public. Basically, you do have control over that.
And Alex might have actually helped his case if he'd said, this is not true. But at no point does he say here, this is not true. And again, this has got over 1 million views, this tweet. So 1.2 million people looked at this and thought, oh, so you are more likely to wait behind non-British national social housing.
You're just not allowed to say it.
Yes, because that would mean that the BNP was saying something correct.
Right. That's not very
Or National
convincing.
Front or whoever it is.
Yeah. Well, this week it's the BNP. The previous one was the National Front. I mean, I don't know. But the point is, Ben's
They don't
making...
exist anymore. Did they fall?
I have no
Just
idea. But the point is, Ben's making a very sensible point. Maybe British people should have priority for social housing in Britain. I mean, that's just... I realise that Ben's now a member of the Nazi Party, but he came out with just a statement like, what the hell's going on? Apparently saying that British taxpayer-funded social housing should be prioritised to house British nationals, reflecting the fact that the first duty of the government is to protect and support British citizens, is now far-right hate speech in the language of the BNP. Yeah, Ben, I hate to say it, mate, but the world has gone quite bonkers. Honestly, not sure what planet these people live on. Come and have the chat with the thousands of my constituents who are on the housing waiting list and see the immense unfairness of citizens of other countries, sometimes even with no legal right to be here at all, being offered housing as a priority when others have been waiting sometimes for years. The world's gone mad. Not sure why I'm surprised. It's totally true.
Yeah, I mean, he's just being straight.
He's being completely straight up. He hasn't locked his replies, interestingly enough. And I thought we'd just have a quick look at the figures. As the Spectator, Matthew Goodwin points out, between 2019 and 2021, 16% of UK-born people were living in social housing compared to 17% of foreign-born. That should be 0%. 0% of foreign-born people should qualify for UK social housing. And then I'll have a conversation about social housing itself. Kind of against that these days. But anyway, the figure is not uniform amongst all communities. You're going to like this one in particular.
We're going to look at the Somalis?
Well, Pakistan.
Oh, great.
South Asia. What do you reckon it climbs up to?
60% probably.
It's only 30%.
Oh, God. Okay.
It's not that bad. But 30% is pretty bad.
Yeah.
Like, why?
I mean, 40% of them don't employed. So
yeah, same with people from sub-Saharan Africa. And
it's also why I'm going to say it now, because this is just known from Australian immigration policy over many years. A lot of people have pointed out, I've even seen Lord Hannon writing about this, can't work out why so many Muslims vote Labor when their religion is socially conservative. And they're also very pro-private property. So some of the conflicts that have been between Muslims and other religious or political groupings, the confrontasi in Malaysia, this is the kind of stuff that Australians know about, or what happened in Indonesia with the Sukarno and Suharto stuff, 1 million people died. A lot of the conflict is Muslims trying to defend property rights against people who they perceived to be communist. So,
which is fair enough. But
so you sort of think, okay, you would think this would be a right-wing religion, property rights, social conservatism.
It is in their own countries.
But the thing is, when they immigrate, the most reliable indicator of whether statistically an ethnic minority is going to finish up voting left or right, in this case voting left, is the rates of welfare dependency.
Yes.
So if you've got larger numbers of people on welfare, they'll vote for left-leaning parties, because left-leaning parties historically have been a soft touch in this area. It's one of the main differences between conservatism and any form of even centre-leftism. And the thing is, this just needs to be accepted. And yes, it just causes difficulty. It even did in Australia, because after the end of the Vietnam War, when the Americans were defeated and the South was defeated, very large numbers of South Vietnamese came to Australia. and they were given refugee status. And the Prime Minister at the time, Gough Whitlam, who was Labor, was very, very angry about this. And he actually said, I am fed up, this is a direct quote, with quote unquote Vietnamese bolts turning up in Australia. And when I say bolts, that has a particular context, because what happened at the end of the Second World War is Australia admitted large numbers of people from Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, and Ukraine. And because of their experience with communism, and they were in very large numbers, they came to Australia. They also tended to be the kulaks, the more mercantile
I bet they
people.
were thrilled to have property rights.
And so they were thrilled to have property rights. And yes, they very, very reliably voted for the coalition, for the Liberal Party or for the National Party, depending on where they lived in the country.
So he's getting anti-communist Vietnamese, and he's like, they're not going to vote for me.
Yeah, and he was right. He was quite correct. I mean, famously, they are a conservative voting ethnic minority. And it's because there are almost none of them on welfare.
But the thing is, people just don't understand that the Muslim world is not principled like the ideological West is, or people from the communist bloc. Yeah, they're in favor of property rights. Their property rights. They're in favor of you giving them money because it's going to be their money. It's literally, what do we gain? And we don't care about whether, we don't care if you're, socially liberal. We're not going to trans our kids. You're just going to give us that money. And that's how it works. And if you want,
basically just, are you part of our tribe or not?
It is literally that simple. And this is why people like Lord Hannon are just like, oh, well, I'm a classical Whig. I don't understand why these people aren't standing on principle. So, because their principle is just mine and versus yours. Because that's what the East is like. It's a place of tribes.
So I happen to know the number, because what is it? I forget the account now. Damn. The guy who
Juice?
Juice did the number for Somali.
What, the 47% of London social housing that's for immigrants. Yeah.
But Somali specifically, it's 70% of Somalis in London are on social housing.
Yes. And they don't feel any shame about this sort of thing.
But that entire country is a basket case.
Oh, absolutely.
And look, here we go again, because of this is what happens when you let one historical event completely colonize your view of all the other historical events. The reason we have the Refugee Convention, which Australia has famously abrogated, is because what happened before World War II was basically boatloads of Jews were going all around the world trying to get out of Nazi Germany. And in some cases, they were sent back. And in one particularly notorious incident, they were sent back and all of those Jews finished up dead, most of them in Auschwitz. So, oh no, we can't have this happen again. Forgetting that historically the reason you had to be very careful with refugees was because sometimes those refugees had actively destroyed their own country.
They're fleeing because they're not being persecuted. They're criminals.
And they destroyed their own country in one way, form or another. And now they'll turn up and they're quite likely to destroy yours. And this can be in terms of straight politics. And I once again give one for history. A historical example. Who was the genius in France who decided that letting the Ayatollah Khomeini stay in France as a refugee and record all his cassette tapes that he did, which were the basis of the Iranian Revolution? That was France. The appropriate response, and that would have been much better for the world and for the people of Iran, would have been for the gendarmerie to do what periodically the French have done historically with people who annoy them, but for the gendarmerie to just, when he turned up at Charles de Gaulle Airport, to blow his brains out.
Well, we've got more modern examples.
Legitimate refugee. If he'd have gone back to Iran during the reign of the Shah, he would have been killed.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
But we've got more modern examples. Look at Libya under Gaddafi.
Exactly.
Loads of ISIS or Islamic extremists came to Britain, commit terror attacks. And it's like, why? Because Gaddafi will kill me? Yeah, because you're an insane murderer.
I hope he does.
Yeah, exactly.
Bye-bye.
I would support Gaddafi.
So what we've done is we've treated the persecution of Jews by Nazi Germany and universalized it, forgetting, like all of these international relations things and foreign policy things, you can't come up with a system because, to use the lawyer's expression, each case turns on its own facts.
Yeah.
And you can't come up with a system. Sometimes it will be right to intervene and defend a democracy. Sometimes Iraq is the classic example. No, that place is a disaster and there is nothing you can do to make it better, you idiots. Likewise, Afghanistan, the place is a disaster. You can't fix it.
Sometimes you shouldn't take the Libyan terrorist.
No. Or you should tell Mr. Brezhnev, who wants, this is going back a bit, who wants Afghanistan, please, you are welcome.
Yeah, it's all yours, bro.
It's all yours. And what else? What do you need in the way of armaments to finish the job?
Yeah.
Not some noble claim about we're defending fellow monotheists from evil communism.
So just to finish this up, I thought we'd go for a quick definition of far right from David Atherton. I think he's got a good one. My definition of far right is a centrist who has read the facts, with an accompanying graph of male Muslim immigration to Sweden and sexually abused women in Sweden. Strange correlation. I'm sure there's no causation. But of course, I thought the final word could be given to the far right, who are expected to, in fact, pay for all of this. Johnny Flag Shagger Esquire, this daft Labour C-word, went to Berlin to talk about the far right. Who are these far right groups the Tories and Labour are on about? Shouldn't they be more worried about the Muslims of the far left who get a free pass? Do we want this lot running this country? I don't. Well,
unfortunately, you're going to get them because the Conservatives and the SNP, it's two parties that are going backwards at high speed, have both
two Blairite parties.
They have just blotted their copybook and they're going to get a kick up the bum from the people of England and the people of Scotland, respectively.
But I do agree, from Mr. Flagshagger's ears to mouth to God's ears, let's hope so.
Average British far right. Londoner gay Englishman. All right.
Yeah.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all premium contents on the site, such as the Epoch series, this episode on the art of Michelangelo. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.